participating and be a part. Okay. I'll wait for that microphone. Are we okay? We're good. All right. I hope when you came in, you received one of these 6-page green sheets that include our minutes from the previous meeting, or our minutes from the previous meeting, as well as our agenda for tonight's meeting. And I'll entertain a motion that we accept our minutes as printed. Do we have a motion to that effect? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Is there any discussion concerning last month's minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor of the adoption of last month's minutes say aye. Any opposed say no. And the motion carries. Now I'll turn over to November 6th, which is our business conference agenda for tonight. We do have some letters to be granted. Dalton and Allison Kane, Charles and Mary Ann Beecham, C.W. and Sylvia Patterson, all to the Ivy Creek Baptist Church in Beaufort. If there's not a objection, I'll entertain a motion that we grant them all as requested. We have a motion. We have a second. Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Any opposed say no. And the motion carries. If you would please look at the ministry reports. We've got several, both from our ministry staff as well as from some of our lay ministries. Does anyone have a question concerning the ministry reports or wish to speak to your ministry report? Speak now or forever hold your peace. All right. Then we'll move on to the deacon body report. We have 6 deacons that were introduced to you this morning. They are the ones nominated by you and approved by our deacon nominating committee. Robert Sproles serves as our chairman of the deacons, and he's going to come and make the motion.
It's really not going to be a motion. It's going to be an affirmation by the bylaws, because you have nominated, the deacons have selected in consultation with Brother Mark. So what we're doing to you is asking for an affirmation according to Article 7.1.3 of the bylaws. The deacon body is presenting the following candidates for the church for affirmation: John Bell, Scott Hales, Cadmiel Kumar, Noble Daniel, Gary Lancaster, and Ian Waller. And I want to thank you for your vote of confidence and pray for these men as they lead our church in a servant leadership role.
All right. Thank you, Robert. As he pointed out, this is not an election, it is an affirmation. If you affirm these men in service of deacon body for the coming 3 years, would you say amen? All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, sure.
The deacons also have another responsibility that we take real highly, and that is who's taking care of the church. And that's the trustees are responsible, and the deacons have given a responsibility to make recommendations for this. This does require a vote. And the deacon body makes a motion to approve Frank Tetherton as a trustee of First Baptist Church of Duluth for the 2023 through 2025 term.
All right. You hear the motion of the deacons. Is there a second to affirm? There's a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of electing Brother Frank to 3-year term with the trustees, say aye. Any opposed, say no. And the motion carries. Anything else? Thank you, sir. And anything from our trustees tonight? I don't know of any business to be brought. Anything from our committees? We've got a couple of written committee reports, one from missions, one from weekday preschool, as well as one from properties. Anyone wish to speak to these reports or give a report that's not printed? All right, we've got a couple of items of discussion tonight under new business, but before we get there, I'm going to ask for our treasurer's report. So, Ms. Ruth, would you come and give our treasurer's report at this time?
Okay, good evening, everybody. I trust you all have the income and expense statement with you. I don't want to break this. Thank you, Sam. Sam, you will have to come back after me because this is going to go here. I trust you all have the income and expense statement with you. So let's just dive right in. And looking at the income for September, we closed with a total income of $129,848, bringing our year-to-date total to 1.075. This year-to-date income amounts to 60% of our 2022 budget, leaving us a 40% requirement in order to meet our goal of 1.79 this year. You have the chart behind me, and you also have the charts on your handouts. Any questions so far on the income side? If not, I will move on to the expenses. On the operating expenses, we closed September with $256,526 as our operating expenses for the month, bringing our total year-to-date expenses to $1.3 million. And you will see that we had a couple of items there reflected, which bumped up that figure somewhat by 100,000 almost, and one of those is the Ministry of Personnel. Those were to do with relocation expenses for a new worship director. Apart from that, anything catch your eye? Any questions on the income? So looking at that chart up on the screen there, these are the year-end projections that I arrived at based on the averages for 2022. So the averages are calculated at the 9-month period, that is the year-to-date at $1,075,000 for the total income. And if you look at the chart, you will see that we could expect, based on the averages, for the end of the year, our giving to go up to 1.4 million. Whereas if you look at the expenses, you will see that our total expenses, we could close at 1,740,000, which is very close to our 1,790,000 budget, which leaves us with a shortfall to plug in, that difference of $300,000. And these are just the averages that I've calculated for the 9-month period. Any questions? If not, we will move on to the balance sheet. John, you can take the rest of the evening, John. On the balance sheet, what do we see? Our cash and cash equivalents stand at $279,000, which is down by $45,000 from last month. Our non-current assets saw a reduction too. And we are currently showing a balance on the non-current assets, which is our ministry trust funds, of $4,853,382. Total liabilities stand at $1 million. Let me go. Total liabilities stand at $1,035,413. That has gone down from last month's $1,153,000. One of the reasons was that we did pay out some funds from the endowment to cover certain expenses, certain capital expenses were covered, which brings us to the available for operating funds standing at $391,724. Any questions? If not, I'm done. Thank you.
Excuse me, I entertain a motion to accept the financial report, the treasurer's report. Do we have a motion? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor of the adoption of the treasurer's report say aye. Any opposed say no. And the motion carries. We have 2 items of business on agenda tonight, both of which are to be voted on next Sunday. Our 2023 budget from the Stewardship Committee and the report of the Governance Task Force and their recommendations before the body. Is there any other business to be brought before our 2 final items? Any other business to be brought before the body? Hearing none. Excuse me. Anyone? Okay, I'm going to start with John Hawkins, Stewardship Committee, the 2023 budget.
Okay, Sam. How do we do this? Oh, that wasn't it. There we go. How's that? Am I close, Sam?
No, not very.
Not very? So I'm sitting over here in the pew, and Barbara looks at me and says, "Weren't we supposed to discuss the budget tonight?" And I woke up and said, "Yeah, I should probably pass these out." I have a few extras. Anybody not get a copy? Anybody not get a copy of the 1-pager description on the budget now that I'm awake? Anyway, we have a few extra copies if you need it. It's been a busy time. When I come before you, I'm always of 2 minds, and I think I've discussed this before in the past. I have my business head, which looks at the numbers and the revenues and expenses and deficits and net income and blah, blah, blah. And I try to give you the realistic picture from that business side of my brain. I don't know if it's the right or the left. But then I have the Christ follower side of my brain that remembers things like do not be afraid, as the angel told Mary. And the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Right? So I'm told not to want, that I don't need to want. The Lord's going to take care of me and lead me to green pastures. And lo, I'll be with you until the end of the age. So I'm always conflicted on whether to just say, well, we'll just trust the Lord and all will come out well with regard to the budget. And I hope those 2 aren't mutually exclusive. I hope we can do both. The Lord has given us brains to do math and arithmetic with and to make sensible decisions with. But at the end of the day, He's really in charge. And what we do here, what we accomplish here, aren't our accomplishments and our doings. They are His. So I hope you look at these numbers and some of the numbers that Ruth has already presented you with a good dose of the Lord's still with us. Still guiding us, still directing us. And it may be a little dark in some places where we're going, but we are assured of His presence and His guidance. So that's my hope and prayer that you would see this report given to you. I do have to give you one significant caveat, and that is that the committee, Stewardship Finance Committee, has not been able to meet in whole for the last couple of weeks. So this is a report to the church. I have socialized it with 4 of our 7 members, but we have not voted on this as the report from the Stewardship Committee to the church tonight. A variety of reasons, a couple deaths in families that have kept people away, and we just have not been able to gather with a quorum. So this report is given to you tonight for your pleasure. If you would like it to be voted on, as was the plan next Sunday, it will require a motion from this group, a second, which normally would not be required from a committee report. So this is my capture of what I've discussed with 4 of our 7 members, myself included, and have also discussed it with the pastor and with Ruth. So those 6 individuals at least are on board with that. Let me just Rattle those off: Paul Carey, John Hollingsworth, Leland Strange, Wayne Taylor, Keodia Yoye, Ginger Hales, and John Hawkins are the members of the committee. But this report is for your consideration and for your action tonight. So that's an important point to be made there. Happy to answer questions as you may have them. But let me walk you through what we plan tonight. A couple of quick takes from what you might see in front of you. We're holding our projections for contribution income, which is what you contribute with your tithes and offerings, at 1.6 million, flat from 2022. More about that in a second. What we do show is other income sources showing a significant decrease on the order of $35,000 worth of less income, mostly investment income. In case you have been paying attention to the stock market and whatnot, those investments are likely to yield less next year because our principal is down. The basis on which they are computed is down. So that's a significant decrease. Now, this is not tapping into the endowment principal, so don't confuse that. But the endowment does kick off gains. It kicks off roughly 5% of its principal as income to us. We are directed to use that as 30% for facilities, 30% for ministries, 30% for missions purposes, and then 10% we're allowed to use for general budget purposes. So that's what I'm talking about has gone down. It's what the endowment fund and our investment funds, our reserves, what they kick off, and that's what's coming down. We're not tapping into the endowment principle as per the protocol there. As a result, our budget is showing a shortfall of $90,000 as proposed for the 2023 period. We'll come back to that in a second, but that's just a quick takeaway. And actually, the number, just to be formal, is $87,991,000 deficit, as you see on the bottom line of your one-page handout. Now, it goes without saying that sort of deficit is not sustainable long-term. So we'll talk about why we think that's justifiable, but it's not something we want to do for very long. But let's walk through the numbers. As a result, given the requests that we received from staff and committees, we pushed back on a few of those, namely 3 requests. We are asking the missions committee to consider using their endowment, which they're allowed to do, for $20,000 worth of their purposes. So they had a request that was sizable, and we're asking them to consider using endowment funds for $20,000 worth of that. Asking the ESL request to be held at $15,000. It's still about a 20% increase on the 2022 number, but we just couldn't quite go to the number that they were requesting. And then we are asking personnel to cut back on their request by $20,000 as well. Now, I'll come back to why we think that's reasonable, and why I'm not giving you a lot of detail in terms of we ask personnel to cut $20,000 from the pastor's salary. That's not what we're asking them to do. We're asking them to find $20,000 in their purview to cut back on. And we'll talk about the numbers as we get through to them. That's what allows us to keep the deficit at about $90,000 versus the 140 some that we were looking at when we started the exercise. All right, let's look at your sheet and go through some of the numbers, but those are sort of the quick takes that I would take away from that. Look at the income assumptions or the income projections. As I mentioned, contributions being held steady. And keep in mind that that's still 94.3% of our income. So folks should not should not overlook the fact that stewardship and giving is still how we get things done around here. There's no magic pot of gold, either in a fund or from some outside entity or grants, or this is it. What we give is 94.3% of what we can actually get done. The other income category there is the one that I mentioned, that we are projecting lowered income from investments to the tune of $36,000 or so next year. The other sources of income are fairly minor. When we sell a t-shirt or charge $5 for lunch or whatever, those would fall into those other categories, but they're fairly immaterial compared to the contribution income. All right, let's move on to the expenses. These are the summaries of the major categories. See, missions expenses. The proposed budget is for $39,600. The budget for '22 was $4,600, $48,600. The decrease there largely because of moving some funds around and asking them to consider the cut that we mentioned earlier. So it's not as severe a cut as we proposed, but it is a cut from their request of $59,600. GBMB missions is what we call the cooperative program and the Gwinnett Baptist Association. We're holding those steady from the last time as well, and those constitute 8.7% of our total giving. Remember that the cooperative program is computed as a percentage of our contributions, and we're holding that steady at 9%, Ruth? So that's how that number comes about. The other I would point out is you see a significant decrease in salaries in our projections. That is not the cut I was talking about earlier. It's probably built into that, but the explanation there is the outsourcing of our custodial help. So that number is now taken care of out of the building and grounds budget because it's an outsourced contract. So that you see that number almost identical to that number showing up under building and equipment. $98,000 increase there isn't equipment, it's an outsourced contract for our custodian. I'll have more to say about that in a second as well. The other ministries, you see sort of nominal increases and decreases. We can push into any of those that you'd be interested in, but those come from the various staff members and committees that proposed those, and we didn't alter those at all. The three that I mentioned are the ones that we proposed alterations to, which gives us a bottom line of $1,785,241 worth of expenses, which is more or less where we were last year. So the only difference really in our net income is that assumption we've made about investment income coming down. That's where the deficit has increased from where it was projected to be this year, 2022. We're showing those to you this year as deficits because I want you to know we are running deficit budgeting, which we don't like to do, historically haven't done. Last year, we actually showed an extra item under our revenues called allocation from reserves that zeroed out that deficit. But in discussions with the group, we think you ought to be aware of the fact that we're spending more than we are contributing at the moment, and that's not sustainable in the long term. Now, if we'll go to the next chart, we'll answer the question, which is, why should we do that? Why shouldn't we really stick to spending what we receive? We feel there's a couple of silver linings here. Ruth indicated to you in her report a second ago that her projections were that we would end up with a $335,000 deficit for this year. And that's based on average projections for the first 9 months. And you remember what I always tell you, December is coming. So we can't project December, and December could be a $300,000 giving month, which would wipe out that deficit. So we feel that there are reasons to believe that God provides every year, every December. I feel with my business side of my head I told you about, at this time during budget, that's the side that predominates. Come December, I'm always, why did I worry? God always provides for us in December. So that's the balance we're trying to achieve here, and why we think this $90,000 deficit would be palatable but not sustainable long term. So basically, we have a couple of things we can work on. I mentioned the outsourcing of the janitorial and the custodial duties. Perhaps there's a better way to go about that, but it's the only plan we had before us. So I felt duty bound to include it in the projections. But the wiser approach may be to hire our own custodian, as we have for years, and to do so at a slightly lower cost. Just haven't had time to work through that. I think personnel has discussed it at several occasions, and this is the option that is before us at the moment, so we're budgeting for it. In terms of pushing back on the personnel expenditures, even if we were able to act and hire one or more positions for the new year, we feel those folks won't be on board January 1st. So the allocation of a full year's salary and expenses and benefits would probably be less than is projected there. But we don't want to be too prescriptive with them. As I say, we're not telling them to go cut current salaries or not do raise. That's really kind of up to them as to how they want to proceed with their bottom line budget. And as you'll learn in the next presentation, will no doubt be a point of great discussion with the leadership team if we elect to go in that direction as well. So those are two areas. The bottom line is, and again, it comes back to God providing for our needs. We tend to underspend when it comes on all the expenses. Staff and committees have great ideas in January, but then as they see what contribution levels look like, they tend to hold back if that's what's needed. They tend to reallocate if that's what's needed. And over the years, we have not had an overspending problem or an irresponsible spending problem in this church, at least in my experience. So I think between those three levers, those 3 degrees of freedom, that we can stomach a $90,000 projected deficit for the new year. So we do have some flexibility. We have a healthy reserve, as Ruth indicated. We have $1 million in reserves in the bank. Now, some of that's earmarked for certain purposes, but you can tell if we spend $90,000 more than we make every year, that $1 million will go away rather quickly. So it's not a sustainable thing, but we are blessed in that we can invest in the early years to make our programs work in the short term anyway. Ruth has given you the picture of where we are as of September, and you can ask any questions you might have in that regard as well. The reality is contributions are down and trending downward. We need to fix that. That's an education issue. We have a different church than we had 5-10 years ago, and that may be the reality we are dealing with for the next 5 or 10 years. We need to react to that with the right programs and the right initiatives to get our spending in line with our contributions. And that's a two-sided equation. Contributions can go up, our expenses can go down, or some combination thereof, and we need to address that on a long-term basis. Having said that, we may break even this year. based on December and the scenario I pointed out at you before. And again, we may be wondering, December, what were we worried about back in October? What is this? This is November. What were we worried about back in November? Because everything came together. So I don't want to be Chicken Little, but on the other hand, I don't want to pull the wool over your eyes either. And recall that we had budgeted for a $58,000 deficit this year, and as I say, it may not come to that. So you have before you, I guess I would call it the partial report from the committee, or the report from the partial committee, or John's report, whatever you want to deal with it as. But that's what we, four of the 7 members of the committee think is a reasonable plan for 2023. And if you want to offer a motion, Pastor, I guess that's the next thing, we can discuss it.
As he shared, since it's not coming from committee, it does have to have a motion from the floor. Is there a motion from the floor to adopt the 2023 budget as presented? We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. All right, so we have a motion and a second, so it now is open for discussion. Do you have any questions, concerns, or discussion concerning the 2023 budget?
And I think also the proposal or the protocol would still be to vote on this after church.
Right.
So we're not voting on it tonight. You're not solely responsible for but you are responsible for owning the motion, asking questions. If you
Right.
want to amend it, you can. Anything is game to you tonight.
Any discussion? Any questions? Mr. Robert?
I don't want to nitpick, but I do have one question. In a previous meeting, I heard that there are some security issues in the parking lot at the west of the building at night for the kids who come out late. Is something in the budget to take care of lighting and address the lighting for that?
I believe the report tonight in the facilities report says that will be addressed. I believe was in there, was it not, Bill?
Yeah.
Yep. I believe that is the plan, to address that with the properties committee.
Well, and I knew it had to come through the committee. I was just asking, was it in the budget?
Yeah, so the budget doesn't prescribe how they spend their money. They make a request for a couple of key items. What Bill calls, and I like it as well, is their patch and repair budget, which is fixing toilets and holes in the carpet and whatnot. And that comes as a number to us, but we don't tell them which toilets to fix and which ones not to fix. We give them a number. And the other is for maintenance contracts that may be under their purview as well. Now, if they have a significantly large item, like they want to refurbish the sanctuary, we would probably talk about that as a capital campaign. So your lighting is probably a patch and repair kind of item that they would handle.
Yeah. Thank you.
What's another question?
Don't let me put words in your
Scott, do you have a
mouth.
question? Well, let's get the microphone to you.
Sorry, John. I've always wondered what accounting software the church uses, just out of curiosity.
I'm sorry, say that again, Scott. What?
What accounting software does the church use to govern its finances?
It's something called Xero, spelled with an X. Xero. It's a fairly commonly used package in nonprofits. It is fed by several other instruments like Bill.com, and the one whose name I forget now, Dext, that actually handles payments through the system and mails checks and whatnot. But if you're looking for where Ruth's report comes from, it's called Xero, Xero.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Oh, and one other, Scott. Well, yeah, one other. The church database and online giving system is a company called PushPay. So as I say, Xero is fed from several directions, but the P&L comes out of Xero.
Probably not a good time to ask this question in light of the giving trend, but I am curious about some major things, like our sound system, weaknesses we have there, which I think would probably be quite expensive to, repair or replace. right? And just capital improvements, that just need to be done, which we've put off because of giving. So how, I know we need money, I know it's a cash issue, but how will we get to the place where we can start to address these things, which are crucial? Maybe not the color of the carpet is immaterial, but when we're trying to have a service and, we can't do our online or we can't do other things. I understand, I guess the projectors are out, those types of things, which seem to be crucial for us continuing along the path of ministry.
Of effective ministry. No, that's a fair point. I do believe there are efforts underway to address each and every one of the cases that you mentioned. We've actually already bought the new projectors. They just need to be installed. I think Rico has great ideas with regard to the online streaming infrastructure that we need and that would be effective, and he's included that in his request. There always comes to a bit of a gray area, whether that's a facilities issue or a music issue, because Travis kind of got us in the habit of having a sound and lighting item in his budget request, and it's still there. How we deal with that or what bucket it comes out of is kind of immaterial to me, but there are plans to address that particular one. Different colored carpet would have to be a capital campaign. What else did you mention, Carol? Yeah. 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 So that's a good question. There have been several ideas floated again around a capital campaign theme approach, but I've seen nothing formalized at the moment.
Anyone or anything else? Grant?
Hey, John, I just wanted to ask, Ruth's report shows that we may have a projected loss this year. And you've mentioned a couple of instances where our giving is down. It seems to be trending that direction. Mm-hmm. What would be your recommendation as far as making an adjustment? I mean, how long do we go in this direction before what would you recommend we do?
Wow. Which hat do you want me to wear? So we need to address it, but if you look backwards, and Ruth has a great 10-year matrix, we call it, that looks backwards on our giving trending. The giving trending is down, but as I say, spending tends to track our giving. So if you look at deficits that they're either minor or non-existent. So I don't know how much to ring the alarm when that is the case. And as I say, this year may be another such case where if December comes in, there is no. So I think the real prescription to kill a church is to start winding things down. The minute you start winding things down, they will wind down and you will cease to be an effective organization. So, and I tell the staff this all the time with some trepidation, is don't tell me there's something you can't do because of money. We can find the money. Do the ministry. Do what God is calling us to do. We'll make that work. But on the other hand, I have to be somewhat prudent with the trends, as you say. So I think the approach of the committee in the 3 years I've served on it most recently has been to don't hold off on doing the right thing. Do the right thing even if it shows a deficit. Be prudent. Cut back when don't double your budget unless you really think you can use it. I think our issues right now are more personnel related. So do we have the right mix of personnel to do what we want to do? Do we have the right number of personnel? There are some administrative things that probably need correcting as well. It shouldn't take as much effort to administer this facility as it does. But Gary will point out to you, it's 110,000 square feet. Is that right, Gary? And that just comes with certain baggage, right? And you have to keep it up, or it's going to fall apart and become more expensive in years to come. So the approach has been do what you have to do to do effective ministry with the proviso that you can't deficit spend forever. So you've got to address either the mix of ministries, the mix of personnel that you need to execute on those ministries, or get your contributions up. So it's the left side of my brain talking again about return on investment. If we're spending a ton of money on, I don't know, well, we made the decision that we were not being very good stewards of the mission property. So we got out of the mission property business, right? That's one example of a put and take that we've made over the last couple of years. If we need to make a change, then we should make those changes, but not hesitate to do the Lord's work. Grant, that's not a solid answer, but it's the best one I have. Uh-oh, who's going to win? Smokey? Smokey wins the prize.
So, John, would it be smarter for us to do our budget in the first quarter of the year instead of doing it right now?
Thank you, Norm, for bringing up the question that comes up every year. And we've...
One time you did, didn't you? It predates me.
I'd like to make a motion.
I think at one time the church did. It predates me, but...
Yeah, we did on one occasion. And Leland points this out whenever it comes up in committee, is you're just moving one problem to another. It's not easy to deal with either way, and I guess I'll leave it at that. And Leland, if you want to add some color to that, but we've tried it in the past, Norm, and it hasn't really solved world hunger to date.
Solves knowing what you get in this December, but guess what? Since this December wouldn't be in the next budget, you still don't know where the next one's coming. So we used to have a church budget that I think began in September. Got to figure out December, and until you know December, you don't know what you have, but you're always budgeting into the next year or two. The other way is just wait until January or February to do your budget for the year. Then you know what you got in December. And you
spend last year's money,
But it seems like if we end the year with $300,000 deficit, we would make a different decision about what 2023 budget ought to look like.
I'll make a point about that, Norm, is that we're always able to adjust this budget as the year goes along. In fact, during COVID, we had no clue what was coming in, right? And we went to a quarter by quarter, what we call the rolling budget. And we asked staff and committees on a quarterly basis, what do you need for next quarter? And here's where we are. And that works and perhaps is more efficient, but the committee kind of gets burned out at some point doing 4 budgets a year. But that's a possibility as well. I don't want to dismiss your idea, Norm, if we don't have the accounting correct on how to do some other fiscal year that would solve this problem, but just let you know we've tried it in the past and it really doesn't alleviate you from making prognostications.
I yield my power.
Any other questions? Charles?
More of a comment than a question. I think since I was a little child, we did a very good job with stewardship here. But now we do a pretty good job with financing and handling the finances. And I applaud John for what they do and Ruth. But I really think we need to, particularly in our situation where we're going through the change of the culture of the makeup of the body, that we need to teach and emphasize stewardship more. And we've talked about that before. It's been brought up and everybody agrees we need to do it, but we just hadn't done it.
Yeah.
And I think until we do that, it's really hard to tell what the giving level should be.
Amen, brother. Yep.
So that's the challenge.
All right. Well, the question will not be voted on till next Sunday. I'm sorry. Do you have a question? Okay.
I was thinking that maybe thinking about how we could address this. I look at this crowd tonight, and we're pretty Caucasian, and and yet we don't represent all of our church. And so I wondered about, I'm not saying this is a solution, but just thinking like this, having representatives, pull together representatives from our various ethnic groups. And John, we invite them, you set them down and give them a real simplified, not that they're not smart, I don't mean that, but understanding the
I'm with you.
functioning of the church, because they're not coming to business meetings, but to help them understand the importance of stewardship, and then let them be an influencer.
Yep.
Their friends. Just thoughts like that.
I would not limit that to our multicultural friends. We have some pretty Anglo friends who have no clue how the financing of the church works. You know, folks who come in from different denominations, different faith backgrounds. One that we kick around a lot in the committee is someone who thought the Southern Baptist Convention paid us. Wouldn't that be nice? It's not the way it works, but you know, just the way ministries get funded, and how Foreign Mission Board gets International Mission Board gets funded, and how the seminaries get funded. We used to do that in RAs or youth training. What was it on Sunday nights? It was training union, right? We'd have the treasurer or one of the pastor come in and tell us all about the cooperative program and what that does, and then we go out and play softball. But we need opportunities to do that. One of the ideas I was thinking about, Pastor, is maybe in the context of one of our after-church luncheons, right? Have a lunch and learn session about exciting topics of finance in churches. see who shows up.
Boy, the meal better be real good.
See who shows up for that session.
Yeah.
But no, Barbara, and any ideas, it's communication, and until they're kind of blue in the face, and until we are all kind of blue in the face.
And I will say that this has been brought up in times past, and it is a part of our first class. It's part of what we teach new members. And so it's not without being addressed. It is being addressed. I do think that we're going to have to be more intentional. Ruth?
Yeah, this is just information. So since you brought up, the multicultural congregation, back home in India, the churches actually collect monthly subscription from the members. So there's an idea.
In my home, in my upbringing in Brazil, your tithes and offerings were posted on a ledger in the entryway to the church.
I preached in Brazil, and they collected the offering, and it was posted by the end of the service to where that everyone could see it before the end of the day. So.
Yeah, well, we talked about one of the capital campaigns mentioned stadium seating. Mentioned the idea of stadium seating. I said, yeah, we could sell season tickets to the Sunday sermon.
Well, thank you, stewardship team, and thank you for your input. We will vote on that next Sunday morning immediately after the worship service. Sam, I'll ask you to be the minister of microphone, and I'm going to call on Mayor Nancy to come up. Governance Task Force had a town hall meeting where they presented their proposal here about 3 weeks ago, for the purpose of bringing it before the body tonight to be voted on hopefully next Sunday. And so she has, if you'll give a summary of what you've presented and then make your motion.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This may be hard to believe. 1 year ago, on November 7th, 2021, there was a motion by the deacons to recommend that the church body appoint a study group to evaluate the committee governance structure and to provide recommendations on possible adjustments to this structure. The structure was to provide an effective decision-making process. We were to ensure accountability for all decision makers and to optimize the involvement of the full diversity of the congregation. 1 year ago, does it seem like a year ago? So on November 28th, our group got started, Grant, Mark, Ginger, Ian, Pastor, and myself, and we have studied research, we have interviewed people, we've had biblical studies. We determined that our current challenges are not unique to this church. And like many churches in our area and beyond, the government task force believed that a leadership team structure would benefit First Baptist Church of Duluth. Now, how appropriate that John's presentation came before this, because I was thinking about the correlations of an effective organization, and the effectiveness does affect the budget. So these really are two things that are working hand in hand. The leadership team is essentially a consolidated committee of the primary operational committees: finance, stewardship, personnel, building and grounds, and nominations. And the leadership team, we feel like, would be able to give faster decision-making. So the government's task force is making the following recommendations and suggesting transitional steps to move First Baptist Church into a shared governance structure utilizing a leadership team. We would be listening, or I guess that's the right word to say it, for two different motions. One recommendation for a motion would be this: a motion to suspend the bylaws related to governance and committees in order to meet urgent decision-making needs of the church currently carried out across a wide range of committees, and to allow bylaws and systems committee time to rewrite appropriate bylaws for final structure. The final structure would be subject to church approval. The goal would be to have revised bylaws for church approval by the end of 2023. Primarily, the sections that would need updating would be sections 7.3, 7.4, 9.1, 12.1, and 12.2. These would need to be suspended to accomplish what pertains to operations, committees, and finance. The reason I read the numbers of the bylaws is to show you that it is not all of the bylaws, it's just some of the bylaws that need to be updated. Flexibility is absolutely the key to this working. Do we have all the answers? We do not. And we have answered a lot of your questions over the past few weeks since we've given our report at the town hall meeting and to a few other groups. It is a transitional step, and problems will have to be solved as the transitions move forward. A second motion would need to sound like this: a motion to establish an interim leadership team, that the deacon emeriti would be asked to solicit the congregation for recommendations and then nominate individuals for the interim leadership team for presentation to the approval by the church body. The government task force recommends the appointment of representatives from existing members or those with experience on committees specifically related to the responsibility of the leadership team. We recommend this team include the pastor, one additional staff member of the pastor's choosing, the deacon chair as an ex officio, and 9 lay trained and active. Did I say that correctly? 9 lay trained and active by January 2023, or whatever timeline you have suggested. We want to minimize the need to identify and fill both empty and new positions on existing committees, many of which will be vacant when 2023 arrives. The chairman, the vice chair, and the treasurer would be elected from among the members of the leadership team. Did someone memorize those motions? Just kidding. But those would be the two motions. One motion would need to be to suspend portions of the bylaws so the interim leadership team could move forward. The second one would be to establish an interim leadership team.
I'm going to ask that we intertwine these two motions into a motion to adopt the recommendations of the task force, because they're interdependent upon each other. There's no reason to suspend the bylaws if we're not doing number 2, and we can't do number 2 without suspending the bylaws. And so I'll entertain a motion that we approve the recommendations of the governance task force. Since this is not a standing committee, they can't make the motion, you need to. Is there a motion to approve the recommendations of the governance task force? We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a second. So we're now open for discussion. Is there any questions you have or any discussion concerning the recommendations of the governance task force? Have we got a microphone over here? Yes.
My question is if the bylaws are online, that we can read from them to understand what they are that are being suspended in that regard? I don't know if that's ever been thought of or done.
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm pretty sure that we do not post our bylaws on our website, but they're available. You can drop by the church office and pick up a copy.
Okay, I'll ask for that later then.
Yeah, I don't think we post them on our website. Yeah, you need to do it tomorrow. Church office is closed Tuesday through Friday, as Cheryl just pointed out. Yes.
Just a quick question. I guess the motion that's been offered is worded. Is that fair to say? My conundrum with regard to
Why don't you take it down and just say it out loud? Well, there is a specific, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
No, that's good.
There is a specific way that we amend the bylaws. And so we're basically tasking the bylaws committee to look at those at least at first. If there are additional ones that need to be looked at, they'll still have to be brought before the body, and they'll have to be voted on by the church. It involves presenting them in one business meeting, voting on them in the next. It's a tenuous process. So, but no, they're not limited to those. They just wanted you to know those are the ones that they've identified that need to be addressed.
One other committee?
Buildings and Grounds nomination. They're really consolidated. They're not going away. They're going to work together. Where is Mission? Mission would be a ministry team. And your planning would be presented to the leadership team.
And by the way, let me explain, because I just had this conversation earlier tonight. Every committee that no longer will serve as a committee will serve as a ministry team. The difference between that is ministry teams do not have to rotate members. Ministry teams can recruit and have additional people other than the ministry lead. I gave the example last meeting of women's ministry. Women's ministry is not a committee, but it's a ministry team They have a leadership team. They recruit people in order to perform their duties. Same thing could be true of decorating. Same thing could be true of a building project. Same thing could be true of a mission project. So ministry teams would be the way in which we would perform those ministry service teams that would be enacted through the leadership team. I think it increases our involvement. I think it increases our opportunity to get people invested in ministry. Any other questions? Mr. Robert.
If I can get it turned on here. I do have a couple of questions, and I've shared a lot of my comments that I'm going to make, partial comments I'm going to make now with Brother Nancy, Pastor Mark and Nancy a week ago. So what I'm going to say to them is should not be a surprise. I agree that we need to look at the bylaws. They need to be looked at and make sure we're relevant and updated and current. But my question is, are we moving too fast? And I'm not saying we need to do 3 years to do this, but maybe 1 or 2 months to give us time. And the reason I'm saying that is we're looking at it. You guys have had 11 months to review it and done a thorough job and talked to a lot of people where we're kind of getting it new, and then most people have not had a chance to digest this one very long at all. So I'm looking at the timeline. The timeline is today we're reviewing it in a business meeting, and we're asked to vote for it next Sunday. And some of you may be seeing it for the first time, hearing it for the first time. So is it time enough to do that? The second is there's supposed to be a team to select the members of this interim team from the deacon emeriti. Well, if they're soliciting that from the congregation, that's going to take place more than one day. It's going to take 2 or 3 weeks to get those nominations in, a chance to review those people, and then bring it to the church. And then to be able to bring it to the church at a business meeting to confirm these people and approve these people to work on that committee. Then once this group is approved, they're going to have to sit down and they're going to have to review what their responsibilities are so that they get a charge. And I'm concerned that during this period of time between now and if it's approved next week, between then and the time they can really start being effective, how effective are things going on in the church? And so that's my concerns on there, Nancy. And like I said, you and I shared that, and I'm coming at it from my side, and from what I've seen some in the past, not necessarily here, but other places where we just need to make sure we're doing things in a timely manner. And I prefaced what I said on here with them is 1 Corinthians 14. It says, let all things be done decently and in order. I feel like we're rushing. Maybe we need to have some time to digest, review, get names, whatever, and then not start the actual work till maybe our next business meetings in February, or January, February, March. And is 3 months going to be a killer? I don't think so. But what can we do to make sure people have a better understanding instead of being rushed down their throat without digesting what it is? Give us some time to explain to people so that they truly understand what's being done and why it's being done. You guys have done a good job. I'm seeing not very many people representing the church that have heard this spiel. And I've been at the other times when you've given this, but the majority of the church population has not heard what's being done, and they want to know that too. So if we can do an education between now and then, and I think and I agree, we need to continually look at the bylaws to see where they might need to be updated, monitored, what can we do better. Our population of the church has gone down from 1,200 in Sunday school to 400 in Sunday school, plus or minus, and we still have the same number of people on committees. That's too many committee members for, I believe, for a church our size. But we still have a need for committees, and it's something we need to educate people on what their responsibilities are, because that's how we learn as members to run the church, to help with the church, to do services for the church. So anyway, that's my comments.
I think one of the concerns for the speediness of this, though, at least from what I've learned, is that come January, we may not have full committees to do the work because we are having a deficit in the committees too. Like, we need people to do the work, and if we run to this model, we can train these people to be stewards to the way we're going to do it going forward. And that means, because some of these people that we're talking about who aren't here tonight, they're not participating in committees either. So we need to do something so that we can get everybody together and have a plan so that we can steward everybody properly.
Can I address, Robert, when you shared that with Nancy and I, it made me realize that we had not talked about a transition process because we weren't there yet. But I will tell you that I have contacted the 4 most affected committees, stewardship, personnel, building grounds, and missions, and all 4 of those committee chairs rotate off this year. But all 4 have said they would be willing to stay on and work with their committees through the first quarter of next year in acclimating the new leadership team to processes of where they are and where they are in process. And so I think there was an assumption that that would take place, but it needs to be said that everyone seems to be on board to help this work. Now, can we get it together by January the 8th? Maybe not, but if we don't, those committees have said they'll stay in place through the first quarter of next year. So we have a process in place that will keep things moving. As John brought out, he says, we will continue to pay the bills. We'll continue to, go by this budget. But there'll be a process by which they can acclimate the new leadership team.
And I think that's great to ask them to stay, and that's part of what I think I mentioned in here too, was ask the existing committees to belly up to the bar, so to speak, so that they could be effective in their ministry to help the transition team to understand what work needs to be done so that there's not I don't understand, I don't know, because there's a lot of things, mission committee, there's a lot of things the missions people do, benevolence committee, there's a lot of things that they do, which is hard to tell in just a 1-hour sit down with a transition team, where if they were to work together for maybe 1 quarter during the year and then transition to be more effective. So
that process has been started.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. One, Robert mentioned benevolence, and I know this benevolence will be a responsibility of deacons. Any idea how that's going to be handled? Because right now we essentially handle benevolence by email. We get a request in today, we can have a response back today or tomorrow. But I'm not sure how we'll do that with deacons.
The design, at least initially, in our thought, based on some comments about the current structure being primarily email, is that any internal benevolence would be handled in the leadership team, just due to the nature of it, and then the external benevolence could be handled by a system of the deacons choosing, I think is what we said.
Yeah, that's what's in the document, is that it'd be the
And
deacons.
basically, at least the way I envision it, Steve, is it would happen the same way. Whether it would be a group of the deacons that are set aside to perform that duty, much the same as we currently do through emails, but instead of a separate committee to do it, that it would be a segment of the deacon body that would be assigned to that task.
And part of our thought process on that is the fact that we had 3 deacons on our team, and we kind of saw benevolence as being one of those things that was biblically in line with what the deacons should be doing.
And the current benevolence committee is heavy with deacons also. So
it concerns me that we'll have a large group of people, all the deacons, or we're going to have basically the same benevolence committee concept. It'll just now be with the deacons rather than from the whole body.
The latter, that it would basically be a subgroup of deacons to serve as the benevolence committee reporting to the deacons. Yes.
And then my other question is sort of, could you give an example of how the leadership team will handle something like, we shouldn't have a problem with air conditioners going out, but sound today. You have an issue that's an immediate need, that's a sizable expenditure. how will the leadership committee go about making that decision and implementing?
I think the thought process, and some of the others may have things to add, but the thought process would be that immediate need would come to the leadership team, and they would have expertise in both the finance and the buildings and grounds that are serving on that, and that way you have them together and can make the decision quickly, rather than having to circulate through multiple committees to get a big expenditure done, if that's what's needed.
I'm still not totally clear on that, but my concern is, one, I don't think it'll be an overlay the way it's laid out, but my concern is that the leadership committee is going to get bogged down in all of these things that are going to be going on.
And it's one reason that we've asked for a 2-year time frame for a trial period, is to work through issues like that. I've never worked with this kind of structure, but I will tell you that I'm somewhat excited about getting decision makers in one room and making decisions expeditiously. So, but it's a point well taken, but I do think it's a process we need to work through.
So I don't know I've never worked on any of the committees at this church, but how often, like if I'm on the stewardship committee, if I'm currently meeting once a month for 2 hours, now and if the building committee meets 2 hours, and you start, again, folding that on, but now it's the leadership committee that's now meeting for 8 hours? They don't overlap that way.
You know, we interviewed and talked to First Baptist Lawrenceville that went through this process, as well as Hebron. So their leadership teams turn into about twice a month, 2 to 3 hour meetings. So what we would see is initially there will be a lot of minutia to go through, get the leadership team working together, and probably catch up on decisions that need to be made. But once they become an efficient organization or group, they ought to be able to roll through those issues that come up fairly quickly, because that's what other churches do. They're even much larger than us. Again, Hebron's larger than us, but they meet twice a month, 2 hours, and they're able to take care of everything. And they don't have the committees like we currently do.
You know, sometimes when you have a full agenda, which I walk through a lot of agendas, when you know you have business and decisions to make, you move through the agenda and you don't stay on a topic for an hour. So there will have to be some efficiency in the leadership.
So to address Robert's concern about education, can you go over who you've talked to, what people you've talked to, how many meetings we've had, where the outreach? Just can you kind of give us I know you talked to the deacons. I was there for that one. So what other meetings have we had to educate our folks here?
We had a town hall meeting with between 100 to 150 people.
Right.
Excuse me?
There was 2 of them, right?
No.
No,
we videotaped the town hall meeting, made it available to everyone online, sent out a link to anyone who wished for it. There's also been meetings with the deacon emeriti. They've had one-on-one meetings with different support groups, but now I'll let you answer that.
We do. If you want to watch the presentation, it really goes into at length who all we talk to. Several pastors, theology professor.
No, that's not the question. I was talking about what did you do to educate after you
Orientation of the congregation.
Yeah,
Okay,
not what you did to come to your conclusions. Just what have we done to educate our people? I guess
I think you answered that with the town hall meeting and individual meetings and.
So I feel like that anybody that has an interest in governing the church from a committee standpoint or whatever, I feel like we've been educated. I may be wrong, but I feel like that's been there, and I feel like we've got momentum. You know, I feel like if we put the brakes on this thing and say, well, let's wait a few months, I think we're just going to bog down and not get it done. That was. You know, I love and respect Robert, but my opinion is we need to get this done. No. Well,
agreed.
That's
well, yeah,
a great
because
point.
we're still trying to figure some of it out, but I guess.
All right. Any other discussion? Any questions?
Just one comment. I think there's a lot of benefits here that we're not able to see yet because we're not there yet. And one of those is that we have tried to force a lot of people into committees that, and I think this was brought up about a mission committee one time, that the guy thought individual they were talking to thought they were going to do missions, and all they did was meet. I think what this will do for us in terms of service ministry is it will allow people who are gifted in those areas to get involved in missions or cooking, Ian, or whatever it takes. I think it's probably both of you. But I think that will free up people to understand what their role can be and how effective they can be. But then at the same time, we'll have people. Hopefully, since I'm on the group that has to find these people, I'm thinking that way myself. We'll find people who are good at administration, and administration's a gift, and it takes certain people to do that. Not everybody can handle that, and the interim 9 people or so will probably not be the same 9 people that will end up there a year or two once we get going. But I think there's a lot of benefits that we can't see yet. And I've been sitting in the background with this whole thing, waiting for this to happen for a long time, as I've said several months ago in a business meeting that the system's been broken. And we've kind of recognized it, but haven't taken the opportunity to do anything about it. And I'm glad we are moving forward, and I hope we will.
All right. Any other comments, discussion? Mr. Paul.
Well, first, I just want to thank the committee for your work. I think it's tremendous. I think that we've been on this path for many, many years, and as the previous chair deacon who raised the motion in the first place a year ago, I think that here we are. The time has come. A whole year, as Mayor Nancy has mentioned, has passed. These guys met multiple times throughout the entire year. The church has been briefed on it. There really is no excuse for not knowing about this. Anyone who does not know about this is really, in my opinion, operating out of ignorance or really just that, or not caring. Fact of the matter is that we are, by January, hitting in my opinion, an iceberg that we may not see. And I think that all those, and there's a few of y'all here who've served on a nominating committee can attest, it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult to get these committees going again. I served on the deacons. I'm rolling off this year, but the last 3 years I was an active deacon, so I had the opportunity to hear the feedback of the church. I was one of the people that was on the COVID task force also while the church was closed, so I had a unique perspective of how operations was managed during COVID. And so I think that we have a tremendous opportunity here to move and advance this church forward. I do want to make a point, 2 points real quick. One is what we talked about in a previous committee, the properties committee that I was in just before this. And the first is that we have to somehow get over this mindset right now about the how. How is this going to happen? How is that going to happen? And you need to change your mindset into who. Who is going to be doing this? It's the who's that we're trying to focus on right now that's going to give us the hows. So if we can, once we get the right people in place, the who's, I'm calling them who's, I don't know who they are, but the who's are going to be the people who are going to come up with the hows. And our hope and prayer is that the people that we put on this task force will have the mindset and the knowledge and the skill set to come up with a how. As long as we put on people that I think are great at what they do, leaders of industry, perhaps, the job can be easily done. Another important point I want to just make sure and emphasize is the concept of service ministries. It was talked about here a couple of times. Many of us are already on committees. You have to change that concept of committee, that word, and reinterpret that as service ministry. That's really not going to go away. So if you happen to be on a committee, quote unquote, you really, in fact, are on a service ministry. The main difference moving forward is that the people that are going to serve on these service ministries are people who want to be on the service ministry. Some people, in the current way we're doing things, are nominated, which is part of the problem. And the nominating committee only knows so many people and has only so many circles. And that is one of the pinch points that's going on. So if I happen to have a gift in decorations, well, I'm just going to find the decorations service ministry and volunteer. And get this, if I want to stay on the decoration committee for life, I can. I don't got to roll off in 3 years. If my gift is in grounds and I want to be on that for life, amen. I'm on there for life. I don't have to worry about rolling off. So that is a significant difference that is going to happen here, is that whatever your gift is, you can go follow that service ministry that's there and plug in and stay there. And I think that's one of the big vision here, where we're thinking that it's going to get most people involved, because part of this process is getting everyone involved according to their gift. And you have to worry about rolling off, and nominating doesn't have to worry about finding people. So of course, I'm with you. I pray that this church will succeed, and I think this is a great plan. I pray it does succeed, but I just want to clarify some of those things from my, I guess, unique perspective. Thank you.
All right. Would you go to the back? Billy?
So I think, Paul, you brought up some good points about the 3-year term limitation. That's something that could be worked out with the bylaws and removed, and then allow people to stay on there longer and keep the same structure. I think what you've pointed out were just issues with the current structure that could have been tweaked or changed. I agree with the nomination committee, because you asked me to be on that it doesn't work well. I had talked to others about this, we'd love to have lunches, and this is another one of those opportunities where you could easily have like a committee lunch and have a list at each table for each one of those committees and have people come sign up. Because you're right, we're limited to how many people we know and what their gifts are. I never understood why we didn't open that up to the whole church so that people could come and deal with this. So I look at those type of issues, and I see that's more the systemic issues that I see with the committee structure versus this new super committee that we're looking at forming. I think a lot of the changes around the current structure would solve a lot of those issues that we're facing right now. I never understood why a committee has to send it to 2 or 3 other committees, and then it has to come back to them to be ratified, to then be approved. Once it's approved, it should be done. And there's a lot of efficient ways. If you've ever dealt with the county governments and others, they have a very simple check-off list, which you could have on a computer program or whatever, where one committee checks off, and as soon as they're checked off, it's basically done and ready to move forward. So a lot of what I saw as issues with the current structure are really things that could be tweaked versus throwing it out and forming a new structure. So that's part of my objections. And then I also kind of object to the fact that y'all talked about elders and that was rejected versus going down that pathway. So I never quite understood your logic behind that. I didn't really care for the fact that you wanted to try to put the deacons and the elders and this committee in different buckets, because I thought the deacons, the elders are all leaders in the church, that the church has chosen. So to try to put them in buckets, to me, was an unfair boxing them in. Just like we don't try to box God in, we shouldn't try to box God's servants in either. So that's my comments.
All right. Anyone else? Julie? Yes.
I realize since I've been sitting here that I won't be here Sunday morning. Is there going to be a way to vote for those who are not here Sunday morning?
Our Constitution and bylaw does not permit absentee voting or online voting. So we don't have any provision in our current system to allow that. So
We're not going to do a written ballot.
well, even if we did a written ballot, it would have to be of those present.
Thank you.
It would be. Okay. All right. Okay. And do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion concerning the motion before us? This needs to be voted on tonight. We'll still vote on Sunday on the 2 motions that are before us. But we're having a call for a secret ballot vote on the vote on the 13th. Is there any discussion concerning that? Yes.
I think we did this once before. I forget when it was, a few years back. We did a secret ballot or a written ballot, I think. But only question I had was maybe we should decide who is going to be the counters. You know, should we have one Democrat and one Republican? No, I'm just kidding. But I just want to make for the confidence, because it sounds like whenever we're talking secret ballot, we're talking a confidence issue here, right? So maybe we can define now who are going to be the counters so everyone feels comfortable that the outcome is the outcome.
With your permission, I will ask the deacon officers to be the counters. Are you in agreement? I got 2 of them here. Okay. I'm the moderator, and I can appoint who's going to be the counters. We got 2. Excuse me? Okay, but the 2 of you? Okay, so we've got counters. One of the things that I will tell you is that we've kind of prepared for this in the office because we knew that this was a possibility. It will have the 2 questions, a yes or no, and also have a place to put your name. The reason for putting your name on a secret ballot is because only members can vote. It would amaze you the number of people who think they're members of the church, but are not. And it would absolutely flabbergast you. And so only members can vote. So we will have to, verify the election, so to speak, and be certain that everyone who has cast a ballot is actually a member of the church. Now, having said that, I anticipate that it won't be, contentious, but it can be the fact that we just want to be sure everybody knows only members can vote. Yes, sir. Okay, The motion is for a secret ballot vote on both issues before us, both the 2023 budget and the adoption of the governance task force recommendations. So we will pass out ballots to be verified by our deacon officers. Secret ballot. Okay, so the motion is on the secret ballot. Are you ready to vote? Yes, sir. Oh, you're just saying you're ready. Okay. Okay, all those in favor of a secret ballot vote to be taken on the 13th, make known by uplifted hand. All opposed by like sign? And the motion carries. All right. Yes.
Is when we vote by uplifted hand during the service, how do you know that the people that are voting then are members?
That's a very good point. But, and if it came down to a contentious vote that looks 50-50, we would need to go to a secret ballot. But we have never, since I've been here, took an uplifted hands vote that's impossible for me to call. Like the vote we just took, it was probably 70-30. So, you know, when it's obvious by uplifted hand, it wouldn't matter if a third of you were not members, the motion still passes. So your point well taken, but we try to tell everyone before we take those uplifted hand votes too, only members should vote. And irregardless, the people whom I know are not members, and I usually go to them afterwards and say, I'd like to remedy that and have you become a member, and here's how you do that. So, all right. Okay, we're back to the original motion. Anything else about the original motion concerning the governance task force?
I have one thing.
Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask, it's been kicked around about the January date. I don't have any problem with the motion at all. I do have a little bit of problem when we talk about having this up and running by January the 1st. By the time this gets voted, you got maybe 6 weeks with 2 holidays involved.
Mm-hmm.
You got get the deacon emeritus's up and running to get them the nominations. You got a lot happening, and it's still got to be voted on. Why can't that single date just be moved out to February or whatever to have that in? We've still got the committees operating. You've already got those lined up. And then as this comes on, whether it be January the 8th, whether it be February the 8th, doesn't matter. We've got somebody to take care of things, and we move right on into it. That doesn't negate the vote. It just takes a specific timeline off so that we're not like our hair is on fire.
Yeah, Smokey, I think it's a target date. It's not a, and the deacon emeriti, if they come back and say we're not ready, or we've not filled all 9 positions, then the good news is we've got 4 committee chairs who've said we'll continue to function until we have it up and going. So I think it's a target date. It's not a, you know, when they were first talking about this, we're trying to move towards 2023. So January the 8th, it's target date. So, but it may be February, maybe March, but it's point well taken. Yes.
To Smokey's point, if we're going to do that, then we need to probably amend the language in the first part about suspension of the bylaws to mention at such time as the interim leadership team is constituted and active. Because you don't want to take away some of the things in the bylaws to be done up until that point that the interim leadership team is constituted and active.
That's a point well taken, but I think I can just say that by consensus because I've put the 2 motions together. And so basically they are intertwined. So we're not voting on them separately. So, but that's a point well taken, that you don't suspend the bylaws till they need to be suspended. Does that make sense? Everybody on the same page?
But that
Okay.
was the reason I thought it was worded that way, Ian, was because, to your point, Smokey, technically, come January 1st, I'm not allowed to convene the Stewardship Finance Committee to do anything because I haven't been nominated beyond December 31st. What this allows is for that leadership team to be the ultimate buck stops here, but they're going to count on us to keep the lights on, and we're happy to do that. But I can't propose a new budget January 2nd because I'm not on that committee anymore, right? So, but now the bylaws have been suspended. They're in charge. They asked me to do it. I'll do it. That's why I thought it was kind of worded that way, and why January 1st is kind of a watershed, because we don't have a lot of legalisms in this church, but we would be outside of the bylaws if we kept making decisions on the current schedule.
I think you're right either way.
Any other questions or discussion? All minds and hearts clear. I'll entertain a motion, we adjourn. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Anybody ready to do that? All those in favor make known by standing. First of all, I want to say a great big thank you to the Governance Task Force. Thank you for your 1 year of service and for what you have done. Thank you to our Stewardship Committee and the 2023 budget. And as he was sharing this tonight, although there are things that I know are not great news for us, the good news is that God has always provided. Yes, sir.
He asked about, did we vote on the motion that he made? Make a motion and we didn't vote on it?
No, we voted on the motion to. Did you make a motion? I'm sorry. Did I miss that?
No, I didn't. We voted on the motion, I thought, for the vote, to be secret vote. But did we ever vote on the motion to carry over to be presented to the church? We didn't.
Oh, thank you. Smokey, thanks for being alert. Yeah, we have a motion before us to take it to the church on the 13th. Thank you very much. So we have a motion to take it to the church on the 13th. I'm sorry, yes. For those of you that couldn't hear that, Singhi said, call to the church tomorrow if you'd like a copy of the bylaws or the Governance Task Force presentation. We'll try to get it to you tomorrow. We're out of the office Tuesday through Friday. All those in favor of the motion that the Governance Task Force be presented next Sunday, all those in favor make known by uplifted hand. All opposed by like sign, and the motion carries. Now, all those in favor of adjourning make known by standing. Father, thank you for our gathering tonight. God, thank you for just wonderful servants who've worked diligently for months to be able to make these presentations. And God, thank you for a church body who listens with their heart and desires for what's best for the body. God, I'm so glad that we don't have to agree in order for us to be a part of the same body. And so, God, help us to see fit to disagree without a disagreeable spirit, and to help us to be able to become one in Christ. Father, I know that the heart of this task force, the heart of our stewardship committee, is that we be united, pulling in the same direction, and that we become more effective. And Father, pray that we will do that. For I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, folks. Well,